Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time when mud was fashion, soup was mostly water, and bathing was a twice-a-year luxury. You're about to step into the life of a medieval farmer, a life of sunrise labor, suspicious cheese, and an economy where owning a chicken made you middle class. Picture this: damp straw poking your ribs through a mattress that smells like old sheep and bad luck. Outside, your one-eyed pig is already screaming for breakfast. The sky is low and gray, because of course it is, and the cold sticks to your skin like guilt. You grab your wooden hoe, your only shirt, and a piece of bread so stale it could be used as roof tile. And just so we're clear, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge out into the morning mist, feet sinking in soil that's more swamp than field. Your village smells like wood smoke, dung, and desperation. But this is your life, and honestly, it's not even the worst it's been this year. You're a villain, tied to the land, owing labor to a lord who thinks owning half your crops and all your dignity is fair trade for protection. You're part of a small manor village, maybe 30 families, tops. Your house? A one-room hut made of wattle and daub, which is a fancy way of saying sticks and mud, with some straw tossed in so the walls don't cry. You live with your spouse, 3 kids, a goat that refuses to be milked, and possibly a ghost. Nobody's sure. Your lord lives in a nearby manor house. It has windows that open, with glass. He gets meat, books, and a feather bed. You get rye, chilblains, and a piece of folklore that says elves curse your toenails if you don't respect the moon. Each day is a rinse and repeat of digging, sowing, weeding, harvesting, unless it rains, in which case you dig, sow, and weep in mud. But hey, you're not alone. Everyone in the village works the same rhythm, dictated by the seasons and the bell of the local chapel. Church is mandatory. Joy is optional. Historians still argue whether most lords truly believed they were divinely entitled to your labor, or whether they were just really good at pretending. Either way, your life is their income, and your best hope is to avoid attention. The more invisible you are, the fewer taxes, tithes, and punishments fall your way. The animals you care for, pigs, sheep, chickens, sometimes live in your house. Especially in winter. You get used to it. Mostly. That one sheep still watches you when you sleep. On feast days, you get a tiny taste of celebration. A bit of extra food, music played on a rebec, sort of like a violin if it were made by a sleep-deprived carpenter, and people dancing in circles until someone's shoe catches fire in the bonfire. You laugh. You eat. You pretend, just for a moment, that you're not one harvest away from starvation. And the jokes are there, quiet, dry, whispered over firelight, about how your cow farts more than your priest, about how Walter tripped over his own plow last week and blamed it on the devil. Humor keeps the edge off the hunger. But even the best day is still hard. A bad year? That means drought, or frost, or too much rain, or not enough, or bugs, or blight, or war, or bandits, or wolves. Or that one kid with the lazy eye who's definitely a sign of the end times, according to old Marjorie. Here's a weird tidbit. Some medieval farmers believed singing to crops could help them grow. like full-on lullabies to barley fields. It sounds silly now, but when you've got nothing but earth, sky, and a heart full of hope, maybe singing makes sense. Every night, your body aches in places you didn't even know had names. You eat a bowl of pottage, think vegetable soup, if most of the vegetables have stage fright, and collapse beside your family. One blanket between 5 of you. No fire, because the woodpile ran out in February and it's now March. You pull your feet up under your tunic and pray tomorrow doesn't bring rain, or frost, or plague. Again, this is survival, raw and relentless. You don't dream of castles or heroism. You dream of 3 eggs and a dry sock. And still, you keep going. Because this land, as cruel as it is also home. Your hands know the soil. Your ears know the wind. And somewhere, deep down, you believe that maybe, just maybe, your children will have it better. You wake before the sun, not because you want to, but because a rooster with a personal vendetta against sleep has decided 4:12 a.m. is the new dawn. You sit up on your straw mattress, well, what's left of it after the mice have taken their rent, and stretch out a body that already feels like it's had a full day's labor. Outside, the fog hangs low, thick enough to taste. And today, like every day, you owe more than you have. The taxman will come soon, walking up the muddy path like a crow in boots, clutching his ledger and looking hungry. You're not even sure what he eats, but it's probably hope. Your Lord requires you to give part of your harvest to him. That's normal. But then the church swoops in for its tithe, 10% of everything, even the eggs. Then there's the king's tax, collected whenever the crown decides to fund a war you'll never see. And if you live near a town, you might even pay market tolls just to sell your own onions. You're farming, but your crop is disappointment. A few villages away, someone tried hiding their grain. A week later, the Lord's men found a reason to drag him to the stocks. Public punishment for theft from his own field. His family now begs at the edge of the forest, where even the squirrels look smug. Historians still debate whether peasants understood the broader feudal structure, or if they just lived in it like fish in water, wet, uncomprehending, and mostly prey. What's clear is that few questioned it openly. The last guy who did ended up labeled a heretic. And as medieval history teaches us, you do not want to be a heretic. Meanwhile, the local priest reminds you, gently, that your suffering brings you closer to Christ. But he says this while chewing cheese and sitting on a cushion, so you're not totally convinced. You do your best to stay out of debt, but it's hard. You need to borrow seeds. Then you borrow a plowshare. Then you owe your neighbor a week's labor, and now your chores have chores. In your spare time, which is to say, during the few minutes between sunset and unconsciousness, you dream of a year without famine, or rats, or taxes, not riches, just less worse. Some villagers whisper about the forest, about running, escaping, becoming bandits or hermits. You once met a man who claimed he did just that. He now talks to moss and smells like cabbage, so maybe not the best plan. Quirk alert. There's a rumor going around that if you sleep with garlic under your pillow, the tax collector will skip your house. It doesn't work, but at least your dreams smell tasty. And yet, amid all this, you find little joys. A child's laughter. A loaf of bread with actual flour in it. A night where your cow doesn't knock over the lantern and almost burn down the house again. You learn to barter, your wife's weaving for some salted fish, your spare turnips for a comb. Sometimes you trade favors. Help Thatcher John fix his roof, and he'll lend you his donkey for the barley haul. It's a delicate balance of goodwill and necessity, and breaking it means social death. Your daily prayers get longer. Your complaints get quieter. Your laughter, though rare, sounds like a victory. One cold evening, the Lord's steward gathers the village. He announces a new tax to fund a bridge 2 days right away. Someone dares to ask, "What if we never use it?" He gets a glare that says, "You'll use it in heaven if you're lucky." This is the rhythm of your life. Toil, give, repeat. You start to see time not in years, but in how many sacks of grain you manage to keep. Your children ask why the priest gets wine and they don't. You have no answer, so you tell them heaven has a vineyard. Maybe it's true. You know others have it worse. Some villages have lost their entire harvest to flooding, others to bandits. You've at least got walls and neighbors who'll share firewood. That counts for something. But you also know that if just one thing goes wrong, one drought, one bad frost, one illness, there's no cushion, no mercy. You'll owe even more and be given even less. So you work. You love your family fiercely and laugh when you can. The world is unjust, but it's yours. For now. The smell hits before you even reach the door. Your youngest has been complaining of stomach cramps, and now the whole house reeks of something sour and wrong. Outside, the barley has gone black in patches, and the rye, well, let's just say your bread has been giving you visions lately. You nibble at a crust and suddenly remember your grandfather's warning. If the bread makes you see angels, spit it out. Easier said than done when that bread is the only thing between you and hunger. This year, the harvest is strange. The wheat is stunted, the oats are limp, and the rye has turned a dusty purple. But you bake it anyway. What choice do you have? Ergot. You don't know the word, but you know the symptoms. Burning limbs, shaking fits, people screaming that their skin's on fire. The village priest blames sin. Old Marjorie says it's a punishment for dancing on Saint's Day. Your neighbor swears he saw his pig reciting the Lord's Prayer backward, so clearly something's off. Historians still argue whether entire communities experienced collective hysteria due to ergot poisoning or if it was conveniently blamed when strange behavior got out of hand. Either way, you've seen enough to know bad bread means bad days. You try to purify the grain, soaking it, drying it, even blessing it. The local herbalist suggests adding poppy seeds for balance. You're not sure if that works, but the dreams afterward are pretty exciting. One night, you swear you duel a talking squirrel. You lose. To make matters worse, the rains came too early. Fields flooded. Rats danced through your pantry like it was a festival. You lost half your stored grain in one night, chewed straight through the sacks. The cat? Useless. She just watched. There's a certain humiliation in admitting you can't feed your family. It's not just hunger, it's shame. So you pretend. You water down the pottage. You add more cabbage. You chew slower as if that makes the bowl fuller. You hear whispers, again, about the forest. About groups of people leaving, becoming green men, living off roots and mushrooms. You wonder what kind of mushroom you'd have to eat before that life sounds romantic. Quirk of the time. Some folks believe burying a slice of bad bread under a tree will draw out the poison. The only thing it draws is raccoons. Famine tightens its grip. You see it in the hollows under your neighbor's eyes, the way they stop smiling, the way children don't run anymore. They just shuffle. Even the dogs have lost their bark. Then the news comes from the traveling peddler. He speaks of a sickness to the south. A fever, he says, but not the kind that sweats out. He says towns are dying in days. He says a boat came from across the sea, and it carried death in its hold. You laugh, darkly. If death's coming, maybe it'll finally ask you what you want. Meanwhile, the church rings the bells louder. Priests preach louder. Pray harder, they say. Confess deeper. You do. Not because you believe it'll stop the famine, but because it's something to do. Historians note that the recurring famines of the 14th century, like the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, weren't just acts of God. They were worsened by war, overpopulation, and mismanagement. But no one tells you that. You just assume the sky hates you. Your neighbor, Anselm, digs a second root cellar and disappears into it for 3 days. When he emerges, he claims he's spoken to a saint who told him to eat pine needles. He now smells like sap and sadness. Still, you hold on. You plant again. You sing to the earth. Not because it helps, but because it's tradition, and tradition is a kind of defiance. There's a final absurdity to it all. After weeks of failed crops and spoiled bread, the church demands an offering of thanksgiving. You give them an egg, the last one. You do it with a smile so bitter it could curdle milk. It starts quietly. A merchant doesn't arrive at market. A monk arrives instead, whispering of sickness spreading in the southern ports, of men dropping in the streets, their faces blackened, their mouths dripping foam. You try not to listen. Merchants always bring rumors. But then someone in your village finds a dead rat curled in their flour bin, and suddenly the whispers aren't so easy to ignore. Then the dogs start dying. No one wants to say the word, not out loud, but it rolls through the village like fog, thick, creeping, and impossible to outrun. You first notice it in the air. The smell changes. There's a kind of rot that doesn't belong to anything you can name, part sweat, part decay, part something older. Then the coughing starts. Not from you, not yet. From Thomas the Cooper. Then his wife. Then both of them go quiet. You're not allowed to bury them in the churchyard. The Lord's men nail a warning to the church door, marked with the dreaded red cross. You read the word scrawled beneath it, pestilentia. It's here. The fleas arrive before the sickness. You've been scratching for days, thinking it's just bad hay or your straw mattress acting up again. But then your youngest, barely 5, wakes with swollen lumps under her arms. She says they burn. By dusk, she's shivering and delirious. By dawn, she can't speak. By the next sunset, she's gone. You bury her under the old apple tree. Quietly. No priest. No hymn. The ground is too cold and you're too numb. You've never cried so hard and never so silently. Historians still argue whether the plague was spread primarily by fleas on rats or by airborne droplets once it hit the lungs. You're not a scientist. You just know that people are dying faster than you can remember their names. The village bell doesn't ring for every death anymore. It just rings once a day now. A general acknowledgement of loss. A mass eulogy. You stop asking who's gone. Old Marjorie begins burning herbs outside every hut, waving bunches of sage and lavender and muttering prayers. Some say it helps. Some say she's lost her mind. She says the herbs confuse the devil. In truth, everyone's lost something. Faith, clarity, maybe even a bit of their soul. You start seeing strange things. Processions of flagellants, men and women walking barefoot, whipping themselves bloody, chanting for forgiveness. They say it's punishment, that humanity deserves this. You're not so sure anymore. Court time. Someone swears that carrying a dried toad in your pocket will keep the plague away. You try it. Now you just smell like a swamp and sadness. More people die. You begin to notice how many houses are dark at night. How many fires have gone cold. Some families vanish without a word. No goodbyes, no screams. Just gone. You wonder if they fled, or if they're still lying inside, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to look. The Lord's steward stops collecting taxes. Not because of mercy, but because there's no one left to pay them. The manor fields go unplowed. Your oxen, half-starved, wander freely through the barley. No one stops them. No one cares. One morning, you see a horse without a rider gallop down the road, its saddle empty, its reins trailing like a forgotten memory. It's the freest thing you've seen in weeks. There's no more bread in the village. The baker died last Thursday. His apprentice died Friday. No one opened the bakery on Saturday. You break into your last sack of barley and eat it raw. You dream of rats. They swarm through your sleep, whispering in a language you don't understand. You wake up sweating and itching. You find yourself praying more often, not for salvation, but for stillness, for peace, for the end to come quickly, if it's coming. Some people try to leave. The gates are locked. Some try to fight it with herbs, with fire, with hope. But most, like you, just wait. And though you know the end might come at any moment, you still get up in the morning. You still feed the animals. You still sweep the floor. Because there's dignity in defiance, even if it's quiet and crumbling. The breath is the first thing to go. You wake in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, your chest fluttering like a bird trapped under ribs. You sit up and the room tilts slightly, like the earth just shifted a little to the left without asking permission. You cough. It starts small. By morning, it sounds like someone trying to exorcise your lungs. You're not alone. The plague changes form. It used to swell and boil, lumps and fevers and vomiting. Now, it slips into your lungs and drowns you from the inside. They call it the pneumonic plague. It moves faster, kills quicker. The coughing spreads it with every breath. You think back to the traveling friar who collapsed mid-sermon 2 villages over. He had blood on his teeth. Now you wonder if you clapped when he finished. The air feels heavy, not just with smoke or rot, but with fear. The kind that lingers in corners and clings to your clothes. The kind that makes children stop asking questions. Your neighbor lights a fire in his front yard and won't let anyone near. To burn the bad air, he says. He stands there all night, throwing in bits of cloth, herbs, meat. His wife left days ago. No one blames her. You find yourself sleeping less, eating less, feeling less. The days blur. You forget what month it is. Maybe it's Lent. Maybe it's summer. The birds don't sing anymore, so you can't tell. One night, you sit by your dying fire and stare into the embers. You hear someone sobbing softly in the next hut. Or maybe it's you. Historians note that the psychological toll of the Black Death led to increased superstition and a decline in rational thinking for years after. That checks out. You just watched someone try to heal a child with pigeon feathers and melted candle wax. It didn't work, but the gesture was beautiful. Your lord is gone. Vanished one night with a wagon and 2 guards. Left a letter nailed to the manor door. It just says, God protect you. Thanks, my liege. With the lords gone and the priests either dead or locked in their abbeys, you'd think people would panic. Some do, but most just slow down. There's a strange silence settling in, as if everyone's waiting to see if they're next. And yet, something shifts. You notice it the day your neighbor's son comes to ask if you need water. He's 12, lost both parents, but still, well, he helps. The village well is cleaned. Together, you see an old man teaching 2 children how to grind barley. Not his grandchildren, just children. Something is holding even as everything falls apart. Quirk of the week. Someone starts wearing a necklace made of crushed rose petals and vinegar-soaked rags. They say it cools the lungs. You try it. It mostly just makes your neck smell like a salad. That night you dream of the harvest. Not this year's, not next. A perfect one. Golden wheat stretching as far as you can see. A sky so clear it hums. You wake up crying, but it's the kind of crying that feels like remembering, not grief, just longing. You think back to your daughter's hands, how small they were, how she used to pretend to stir the pottage even when the pot was empty. That memory keeps you warm for a minute longer. There's talk now of mass graves. No more time or space for single burials. You help dig. It feels wrong, but so does everything. You place the bodies gently, carefully. You whisper apologies to each one, and then you cover them and walk away. Historians still debate how accurately the plague mortality rate can be calculated. Some say 1 in 3 died. Others say more. But you know what it feels like? 1 in 2. Every face you remember has a matching silence now. One evening, you find a child on your doorstep. Dirty, wide-eyed, alone. He doesn't speak, just holds out a cracked piece of bread. You take him in without question. You don't even ask his name. There's no need. He's yours now. You cough less this week. Maybe it's passing, or maybe you've simply adapted to dread. There's a strange calm that comes when everything's been stripped away. You have nothing left to fear, just survival, one moment at a time, and that somehow is enough. You don't hear the church bells anymore. Maybe they've stopped ringing. Maybe you've just stopped noticing, or maybe no one's left to pull the rope. You haven't seen a priest in over a month. The chapel doors are shut tight, barred from the inside. A parchment hangs from the lintel, brittle with age, ink smeared by rain. You catch the words mea culpa scrawled across it, along with what might be a list of names. You don't know if they're prayers or confessions. You knock once, then twice. No answer. It's strange how quickly the sacred becomes silent. The dead lie longer now. No one's burying them fast enough. You find yourself avoiding certain paths where the smell clings, and the flies rise like smoke when the wind shifts. There's a girl in your village who used to sing every morning. Sweet, high notes that dance through the thatched rooftops like birdsong. You realize, suddenly, that you haven't heard her voice in weeks. You don't ask. Without priests, there are no sacraments, no baptisms, no last rites. You've taken to muttering your own versions. They're not official, but they feel holy enough when said with clean hands and steady breath. One night, the sky turns violet and thunder cracks without rain. People gather outside and stare, heads tilted like sunflowers. A woman whispers, "It's the end times." A man nods, or just Tuesday. You don't laugh, but it's a good line. Historians still argue whether the church's authority truly declined during the plague or whether it merely fractured and then reabsorbed public faith. On the ground, though, you know what you feel: abandonment. No sermons, no incense, just wind and whispers. Some monasteries are entirely empty. You walk past one on a supply run, and the doors are ajar. Inside, overturned candles, broken goblets, footprints in the dust leading nowhere. You don't go in. The village healer, half herbalist, half gossip, has stepped into the priestly void. Her name's Alice. She gives out poultices made from mint, onion skins, and boiled frog water. It doesn't cure anything, but people feel better afterward. That's enough. She also tells stories of how the stars are falling, of how sin has weight, and it's cracking the world open like a rotten nut. She says the plague has a voice, and it's calling people by name. You believe her. Quirk alert: Alice also keeps a bowl of vinegar and iron nails by her door to ward off malevolent humors. It smells horrific. Probably why her house is the only one the rats avoid. Meanwhile, strange men arrive in the village. Not nobles, not beggars, something in between. They wear long black robes and masks shaped like bird beaks, filled with herbs. You don't know what to call them yet, plague doctors later, but for now, you just call them terrifying. They poke at the sick with long sticks. They mumble in Latin. They take notes, then leave. No one ever gets better after they visit. Then there's the question of blame. It always finds a target. Old Marjorie's been muttering again, this time about the woman with the black cat from 2 villages over. Says she never gets sick. Says she talks to crows. Says she smells of sulfur. The villagers don't need more than that. They march out with torches and come back 2 hours later with red hands and ash in their hair. You don't ask. But now you know. Fear is hungrier than any famine. Later, someone suggests that the plague came from poison wells. You notice people watching the foreigners more closely. Anyone with strange clothes. An accent, a limp, a scar. Suspicion blooms like mold. You catch yourself doing it too. A boy coughs twice and you instinctively step back, even though he's your friend's son. What's mercy when your own lungs are at risk? Still, there are moments of grace. A widow leaves bread on your doorstep. No note, just kindness. You help a blind man find his way to the well. He thanks you by singing a hymn you haven't heard since childhood. It breaks something soft in your chest. And the girl who used to sing? One morning her voice returns. Faint, cracked, but unmistakably hers. You stop and listen. You almost cry. Almost. There's something sacred in survival. Not just in living, but in choosing to still be human, to still help, still hope, still sing. Even without priests, even without answers. You light a candle at sunset. No icon, no altar. Just flame. Just faith. It flickers against the wall and casts a shape that looks like wings. You don't blink. There's a new rule today. No more gathering in groups. Not for prayer, not for markets, not even for funerals. The steward, yes, he's still alive, somehow posted it with a nail through the chapel door. You didn't bother reading the whole thing. The tone was clear. Don't be seen. Don't be heard. Don't be together. You half expect the parchment to start coughing. The rules come faster now. No touching, no travel, no strangers in the village. You must report sickness. You must isolate. You must. All while people are too sick to stand. The irony isn't lost on you. The new laws feel like they're being invented by people far away who haven't seen what a starving child looks like when they don't understand why their parents won't hold them. And the punishments? Harsher. One woman tried to flee the village to reach her sister in the next town. She was caught, brought back by 2 guards in leather gloves and long scarves. The next day, she was put in the stocks. Not just for punishment, but to be seen, to remind the rest of you what happens to those who try. Some folks say this is about order, about protecting the community. Others say it's just a new way to control people too tired to resist. Historians still argue whether the rise in plague-era laws genuinely helped contain disease or simply provided a convenient excuse to clamp down on unrest. From where you stand, it's starting to feel like the latter. But things don't stop there. Now come the accusations. The healer, Alice, is called before the steward. A neighbor claims she's been seen speaking to crows, that her poultices reek of witchcraft. You know it's nonsense. She's helped more people than anyone, but fear doesn't like logic. They don't burn her. But she's told to stop interfering with the will of God. She keeps treating people anyway, quietly, with fewer herbs and more silence. Others aren't so lucky. In the next village over, a man was stoned to death for bringing plague into the valley. His only crime? Coming back home from a nearby town, pale and tired. He wasn't even sick. Not yet. You see more people walking with eyes lowered, heads bowed, not in humility, but in fear of being noticed. You learn to move quietly, to speak in whispers, to stay bland and forgettable. Being interesting is dangerous now. A curious tidbit from this time. Some believe painting red crosses on doorways will protect the house, a symbol that death has already passed. You add one to your door, not because you believe it, but because not doing it might raise suspicion. One evening, someone claims to have found a witch's mark on the body of a girl who died in her sleep. It turns out to be a birthmark. Doesn't matter. People are spooked. They start digging up old rumors like they're gold coins. You remember when the only thing your neighbors feared was a bad harvest. Now it's each other. The village changes shape. Paths you used to walk are now deserted. Places you gather, wells, market corners, the churchyard, now feel cursed. Conversation dies. Smiles vanish. Everyone's just watching everyone else, waiting for them to cough, stumble, or mutter something unlucky. And in all this, you begin to lose the rhythm of the seasons. Wasn't it spring just a few weeks ago? Or was that winter's end? The sky looks the same either way. Cloudy, apathetic, occasionally raining, just to remind you that joy is rationed. The strangest thing, though, is how used to it you're becoming. You barely flinch when the bell tolls for another death. You don't ask who. You already know. Someone you once greeted with a nod, someone you shared bread with, someone who once told you a joke about a duck and a bishop. Now they're just part of the silence. And yet, life doesn't stop. Not completely. You mend shoes. You fetch water. You feed what's left of your livestock. You keep going, because the alternative is sitting in a corner, counting coughs. There's a grim practicality to it all. No more big decisions, just small ones. do I have enough wood? Do I eat the last onion today or save it for tomorrow? Do I check on the widow next door, knowing she might be contagious, or let her die unseen? You choose yes. You knock on her door. She's too weak to answer, but you leave broth by the threshold. It's something. You sleep more lightly now, one hand always near a stick or stone. Not for defense from invaders, but from your own people. Because when fear becomes law, kindness becomes rebellion. You hear it first, shouting, clanging, the unmistakable sound of farm tools being used as weapons. Not far, just down the hill where the village path meets the old cart road. You peek out your shutter and see them, your neighbors, your friends, your fellow sufferers, marching. They're holding pitchforks, scythes, hammers. Someone's brought the iron poker from the bakery hearth. Another has strapped an upside-down cauldron to his chest like armor. It's not funny, but your brain, desperate for something absurd, wants to laugh. This isn't a mob. Not yet. It's something more desperate. A protest. A last gasp. For months, you've watched them suffer. Taxes never paused, laws tightening, lords hiding while peasants die. And now, someone's had enough. It started with whispers, maybe even with you, muttering frustrations into your soup. Then someone scrawled a message in charcoal on the chapel wall. We work. We starve. We rot. And now here it is. The rot has decided to push back. The steward is their target. The lords are gone, but he remains, collecting dues, enforcing curfews, naming suspicious elements in the community. You've seen him. A man who smells faintly of vinegar and righteousness. He stands at the manor gate, arms folded like the plague forgot to visit him. The crowd reaches the gate and doesn't stop. You stay behind, at first, gripping your window ledge with white knuckles. But something pulls you outside. Curiosity? Anger? Solidarity? You're not sure. You just know you don't want to miss it. By the time you arrive, they've torn down the manor's outer fence. The steward is standing on a crate, trying to speak over the shouting. You must obey the king's laws, he cries. A potato hits him square in the face. It's not very regal. They don't kill him. Not quite. He's pushed down, tied up, and marched out of the village with a basket of stale bread and a warning. You're surprised by how restrained it is. But something in the air has changed. It smells, not of smoke or rot, but possibility. Still, deep down, you know how this ends. Historians remember events like the Great Revolt of 1381, when peasants in England rose up in a rare moment of defiance. It was brief, bloody, and ultimately crushed. The leaders were executed, and things went back to normal. But you wonder, was it ever really normal? In your village, there's no great speech, no declarations, just people, exhausted and shaking, looking at each other like they've just done something both holy and terribly foolish. A few days later, the guards arrive. Not many, 3 or 4 men in dull armor, sent from the nearest town. They don't ask questions. They don't hold trials. They just pick 3 names at random and say the king demands examples. You don't hear screams, just the wet sound of a sword doing its job. They leave before sundown. Quirk of the week. Someone buries the steward's boots in the center of the field to ward off bad rulers. It's nonsense, of course, but strangely satisfying. After that, the village goes quiet again. But not the same kind of quiet. This one's heavier. like a lid's been placed on a boiling pot. You begin to notice little changes. People speaking more softly, avoiding eye contact, locking doors even when it's sunny. You catch yourself jumping at shadows, half expecting another patrol. You wonder, was the rebellion brave or stupid? The baker's widow says both. And yet, there's also something else rising. A new awareness. You catch glimpses of it when neighbors meet to reassign farming duties because half the village is gone. No one asks permission. They just do it. The steward isn't here anymore to approve. So they approve each other. A boy starts reading from a salvaged book in the chapel courtyard. No priest tells him to stop. A girl offers to teach weaving techniques passed down from her grandmother. You trade her a bundle of carrots. There's no leader, no law, just people deciding how to move forward. But it's not a utopia. Not yet. Food is still scarce. Disease still lingers. And everyone is still grieving someone. Still, the tension softens slightly. Not because you're safe, but because you're seen. For once, no one is pretending everything is fine. You share a joke with your neighbor again. Something about how your cow is now your landlord since it lives in the manor barn. You both laugh. It feels weird, but good. Historians often focus on the failures of peasant revolts, the lack of weapons, the lack of strategy. But they miss the point. You weren't trying to win. You were trying to be heard. And for one brief, dangerous moment, you were. The first frost comes early. You wake to a world dusted in white, thin ice curling like lace across the inside of your window. The fields glitter, brittle and still, and the chickens refuse to leave the coop. You step outside, breath clouding in front of you, and immediately regret not stuffing more straw into your boots. It's autumn, maybe early winter. Time has gone soft, like overcooked turnips. You used to measure the year by feast days and harvests. Now it's measured in who's still alive to see the sun rise. But something is changing. There's a hush to everything, yes, but it's not fear anymore. It's more like waiting, as if the village itself is holding its breath. Not for another wave of plague, though that fear never really leaves, but for what comes after. The manor house stands empty. The gate hangs open. Birds roost in the eaves. Someone's chalked a smiling face on the front door. A joke maybe, or a warning. No one moves in. Instead, people gather in the chapel courtyard, not to pray, but to talk. Quietly, carefully. You listen from the back as they discuss things that, months ago, would have been unthinkable. Who owns the tools now? Can the fields be split more evenly? Should the tithe go to the healer instead of the church? You don't speak. Not yet. But you watch. And you feel it. That slow, warm ember in your chest. Maybe, or maybe just stubbornness with a softer name. A few of the younger ones begin calling themselves free tenants. No one corrects them. Who's left to enforce the old words? Historians still debate whether the post-plague shifts in social structure were a true revolution or just temporary cracks. You can't see the future, but it sure feels like something has shifted. Wages, for one. That's a word you rarely heard before. But now, the carpenter asks for coins instead of grain. The weaver charges a fee, small but real. There aren't enough workers anymore to go back to. Just do it because your Lord said so. Suddenly, your labor has value. Imagine that. Still, the old rules don't vanish cleanly. A messenger rides through on a mud-caked horse. bearing a scroll from the baron's estate. He declares that all villagers must return to their former duties, that the land is still held in fief under divine law, that all who disobey will be punished. No one even unrolls it all the way. They tack it to the chapel wall and walk away. Later, a goat eats half of it. You keep working, clearing frostbitten vines, salvaging what you can from a sickly bean crop, checking on the root cellar like it's a sacred vault. But you do it differently now. You choose who you work with. You set your own hours when the light allows. One chilly morning, you help rebuild the bakery's roof. The old beams were rotting. As you lift a fresh timber into place, you realize something odd. No one told you to do this. You just did, because it needed doing. That's power, you think, not swords or scrolls, just choice. Of course, the past doesn't leave quietly. There's a man who rides through once a week now, clean cloak, tall boots, polished words. Says he speaks on behalf of the king. Offers rewards to anyone who will name agitators. People who might be sowing rebellion. No one says a word. Later, you see a group of children building a snow effigy of him, complete with a straw mustache and a sheep for a horse. They hang a turnip on its belt and call it justice. Quirk of the season. Someone starts brewing pine needle tea and insists it cures sorrow. It doesn't, but it smells like something close to memory, and that's enough. You begin to laugh more often. Not because things are easier. They aren't. The cold bites hard. Firewood is short. And every meal is still a game of how much cabbage can one person tolerate before losing all joy in life? But you laugh because you're still here. And you begin to plan, not for survival, but for spring. You sketch out rows for planting. Talk with others about digging a shared well. Even mention repairing the old mill by the creek. Ideas, once whispered like heresy, are now passed over mugs of broth like recipes. Someone suggests building a small schoolhouse. Just a hut, really, but with space for books and a place to teach the alphabet. A year ago, that would have been absurd. But you nod. You say yes. Because if this world is going to be built again, it might as well start here, with hands that know hunger and hearts that remember the dead. And maybe, just maybe, with children who'll never need to learn the word pestilentia. The snow finally melts. Slowly at first, just rivulets trickling along the path where boots once trampled mud into memory. Then, one morning, the fields appear under the retreating frost like secrets revealed. Your toes still ache in the cold, but the air tastes cleaner, newer, almost forgiving. You step out early, wrapped in a patched cloak, and see a line of green peeking through the thawed soil. Shoots of something tender, not much, but enough to whisper, "You're not dead yet." The world isn't healed. Far from it, but it's no longer dying, and neither are you. The chickens have returned to their noisy gossip. The cows, thinner than they should be, nuzzle your palms with warm, wet breath. Even the rats have taken a break. Maybe they're tired too. You cross the square and see your neighbors out again, blinking into the light as if it's something unfamiliar. There's no grand celebration. Just a few nods, a couple of jokes, a cautious smile or two. But beneath that, there's something more lasting, a mutual recognition. We survived. You don't talk much about the ones who didn't. Some of their houses are still boarded up. Others have been repurposed. A widow and her children now live in the old tanner's home. The weaver's hut has become a shared granary. No one argues. Ownership means something different now. You gather in the courtyard again. Not for a sermon. Just a meeting. There's no steward. No taxman. No priest. Just a handful of villagers, a makeshift bench, and a cracked slate for notes. You talk about spring planting, how to rotate the fields, whether the stream can be redirected. Real problems. Real solutions. Feels tongues. A man from another village arrives that afternoon, feet blistered, clothes ragged. He says he's looking for a place to start again, that his home was emptied, taken by bandits, or disease, or maybe both. He's not sure. You take him in. That's the new rule now. If you have more than enough, you share. If you don't, you ask. If someone breaks trust, they're given a chance to repair it. No stocks. No gallows. Just consequences shaped by community. Historians often disagree about whether these micro-egalitarian systems lasted or collapsed under pressure. You're not writing history, though. You're planting onions. And yet, there's still risk. Rumors drift in with the wind. A noble family reclaiming land by force, a roving band of guards extorting grain in the name of reinstating order, a bishop traveling with a retinue demanding back tithes from the newly independent. You know what they want. Not justice. Not faith. Just things. Grain, gold, labor. But you're not that same peasant anymore. You've faced death, stared it in the eye through the loss of your child, your neighbors, your way of life. You no longer bow by instinct. Your knees are too stiff for that now, and your back's been straightened by firewood and grief. The children play again. That's the strangest part. Their laughter sounds outlandish at first, like a bird returning too early. But they run between the huts, swinging sticks like swords, inventing stories about monsters and brave pigs and invisible kings who bake pies instead of laws. You let them play. You guard that playfulness like a treasure. Quirk of the season, someone's pet goose, once merely a walking breakfast, has become the village mascot. They've fashioned it a tiny cloth hat. It honks at meetings. No one questions it. On the second Sunday of spring, you hold a feast. It's modest, bread, cheese, a roasted rabbit that may have offered itself too trustingly, but it feels rich. You eat slowly. You toast to the dead, to the living, to the sun. Someone plays a flute. Someone else sings, even off-key. A child gives you a flower they picked from the ditch. You stick it behind your ear. You don't care if it looks silly. The world will not go back to what it was. You know this. There will be more hardships, droughts, famine, cold seasons, and corrupt kings. But this moment, here, feels like a line in the soil, before and after. And somehow, in the midst of ruin, you've helped draw it. Because what they didn't expect, those lords and bishops and kings in their towers, was that the world would keep spinning without them. That peasants could organize. That you could heal yourselves. That you could become more than laborers tied to land, but keepers of it. Stewards of your own future. You're not rich. You're not safe. But you are free in ways they never taught you freedom could feel. You wake one morning to the soft thud of new boots on earth. Not soldiers. Not stewards. Just people. Walking toward the village. Toward what you've helped build. They've heard there's a place where the earth still yields. You light the hearth. You open your door. You say, "Come in." The stars are out tonight. You step outside your hut, the earth still warm beneath your feet from the day's sun, and look up. It's quiet now, not silent. There's a gentle rustle from the trees, a low bleat from a goat who refuses to sleep, and the faint whistle of wind threading its way through the thatched rooftops. But quiet in the way the world sometimes is when it's finally at peace with itself. You breathe in deep. The air smells of tilled soil and wood smoke. Life and labor, honest and earned. The same hands that once dug graves are planting roots now. You think of your daughter, the songs she used to hum, the way her laugh felt like a bell. She's not here, but somehow she is. In every loaf of shared bread, in every voice raised in planning, in every gentle act of rebuilding. The pain doesn't go away, but it softens at the edges, like the last light of day fading into dusk. You sit on a small stool by your doorway, knees wrapped in an old wool blanket. Behind you, your home glows faintly, amber light, crackling fire, the quiet hush of those you've chosen as your new family. You don't know what tomorrow brings, but tonight there's calm. So you close your eyes. Let the cool air wrap around you. Let your breath slow. Let the tension in your chest ease. You've made it through plague and oppression, through hunger and fear, through fire and frost. You're still here, and now, with the stars above and the earth finally resting, it's time for you to rest too.